One of the comments on my last video said, "I am jealous of you because you have achieved what you had wanted." Well, I wrote back that blessed means to be envied. The really amazing thing about what God has done for me is I never asked Him. All those years that I followed Him and searched for Him and did everything. And I said in other videos where He had every thought, every word, every deed, every penny, everything I had was His. And I didn't ask Him to be healed of cancer when I found out that I was terminally ill and only had a few days to live. I didn't ask Him to heal me of lupus when He came through the wall and touched me. I didn't really ask Him for anything. I asked Him only to serve Him, only to be able to love Him the way He so deserved. I asked Him to help me to change into the image that He wanted me to be, the person He wanted me to be. I asked Him in all those things to help me. Those prayers were sincere, and He answered them all. It took Him a long time because when He found me, I was so bad that no psychiatrist, no psychologist, no doctor, no other human being in the world could have helped me. No one. And I could have said, well, they didn't want to help me. They saw me coming. It was too much trouble. I could have said all of that. And in the beginning, that's what I thought. But the Lord straightened me up and let me know that the problems that I had mentally and emotionally and physically were so bad that it would have taken them a long time of prayer to get me out of it. And I found through the years that if you had somebody praying with you, and when you were fasting and praying for something, that it would happen twice as quick as it would happen when alone. But yet I was called alone. I wasn't called to run to anybody and ask Him. He taught me, and I was called to run to Him. I can remember not too long ago, probably about 15 years ago, there was this house on the water, and my husband would dock his boat there and pay the rent. And a friend of his did the same thing. And I can remember finding out and that my house was too small for me. I got so weary of putting things behind the couch, under the beds. It just was really hard. It was a single wide, and it just was hard. And I can remember telling the Lord that if you want me to stay here, then I will find joy. I will find peace, and I will find contentment. I will not complain that I just can't do it anymore. And He told me not to concern myself, that He was going to find me a house. My husband said to me, don't look. We only have so much money, and we do not have enough money to buy a house. And so, being elderly, we have our savings, in case of an emergency. That was what we had that we would have to do. So we couldn't buy another house. But because God told me that He would, I went out looking. And God told me not to. He said, I'll get it for you. And I didn't listen to him. And I broke my heart by looking, because I went where the houses were for sale, and they were on the water. And one was being auctioned off, and the seller refused to take $90,000 for it, because the houses on that street were worth far more than $90,000. And it was a very nice big place. So I came home very disappointed. And the Lord reminded me, He said, I will find a place for you. So a little while later, I'm riding along in my golf cart, and I see the house where my husband used to rent the dock. And the man is taking down the sign. And I stopped him. I had someone with me, the person who gave me the golf cart. She was there. And I said, how much do you want for that house? And he looked at me, and you could see him thinking. His mind and eyes were rolling. You could think he was thinking. And he looked at me and he said, $10,000. Well, I said, you wait here, I'll be right back. So I drove home and told my husband where the house was and how much it was. And within half an hour, we had the papers signed. And my neighbor got very angry. She went to him and she said, why did you sell her that house for $10,000? We would have given you so much more for it. And he said, what's done is done. And she came up to me and she says, I'm angry with you. She says, I wanted that house. My husband and I have been waiting for the price of that house to come down. And I wanted it. So I want you to know I'm angry at you. Like as if I stole it. I had just prayed because these neighbors had troubled me. And I prayed for God to send me a token of His love to let people know that people like me that serve God, God will bless them for all to see. And I didn't realize and put the two together until after it was all done, that it was like a day later that this opportunity for this house came up. And so it needed repairs, and we gutted it. And there was and I've given this testimony before, but I feel so led to give it to you again. The man who had given me the golf cart, and his wife was with me, he remodeled houses for a living. And he came up to our home because we were friends, and he said to Bob, when are you going to start remodeling the house? And Bob says, oh, I figured I'll take a year's rest. We'll start. And the house was in really bad shape. The old kitchen was just so ugly. And the man said to him, and this is such a good man, the man said to him, I'll be here tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Now, this is a man that his wife had come to me how I first met him, and he was in the VA hospital. And they had just told him that he needed a heart transplant and that he wasn't going to live very long. And that the list was so long, they did not believe that he would live long enough to get it. And he was crying. He was 62 years old, and he was crying, big tears coming out of his eyes. I had never seen him before. I walked straight through the room and looked at him. He told me what the doctor said, and I said, take my hand. And he took my hand, and the Lord in me said, you're not going to die, you're going to live, God's going to heal you. And the power of God was so real. I put the hand down, and I walked away. Never said another word to him of any kind. As it turned out, he was so completely healed of needing a heart transplant that the doctors told him they don't want to see him for a year. Everybody marveled. They couldn't believe what God had done. But he was so grateful to be alive that he wanted to do something to show his appreciation. So when the time came and he saw my house, he remodeled my house for nothing. He would not take a penny. We didn't know this. As he was working, we bought the material. And I mean, he ripped out the walls. And he ripped out everything, gutted it completely, and put drywall in, put new flooring in. He did everything. And at the end of the time when it was done, we asked him how much he wanted, and he said not a penny. He would not take a penny. But we were so fortunate because in spite of people being jealous and filled with hatred and envy, God saw to it that we had enough money to get a brand new dock, which was one of those docks that are slanted like this, more like a long triangle, where you just come in and you just back out instead of you struggling with it being sideways. And a lift, an electric lift, and a brand new boat. We got a boat. And we we were so blessed, but there were people who literally hated us because God blessed us. So, there are still people, and I'm not saying the comment of this person, whoever it was wrong, because he was honest. This person was honest. He said, I'm jealous. Now, I know he didn't mean he was jealous in the sense of being jealous. I know that he meant he was trying to tell me how nice it was that I had what I had. I know that. And that he hasn't achieved it yet. And I know that also. So I'm not saying anything against him. He did nothing wrong and he said nothing wrong. And I'm not offended in the least. I thought it was kind of sweet to say that to me. But the ones that hated us, I mean, hated us. I lived next door to them for 7 years and I was not allowed in their house because they did not like the way I talked about God. I couldn't talk about anything else. There was only one thing that I had, and that was God. So he was in every bit of my conversation. And I can remember meeting people that told me, they said, I hate people to praise the Lord. But they said, but when you thank God and praise the Lord, it doesn't bother me like that. And I used to wonder why every time I talk to you, all you do is talk about God. And she said, but I discovered you couldn't help yourself because you're full of Him. It was amazing to me that this woman, who was so hard in her heart, that was so upset over people, but she referred to him as being hypocritical. This is why she couldn't bear to watch them and listen to them praise the Lord. So, anyway, this house, we'll get back to this house and what God had done. It was super amazing. Now, we sold that house for what it was worth, because every house I ever sold, I went to God and asked Him how much it was worth. And He told me exactly what it was worth. And it was hundreds of times of 10,000. It was unbelievable. So we have enough that if anything happens to him or me, we have enough to cover it. That was all my husband was concerned about, that if anything happens to him, what would happen to me? So this is why he was very frugal on everything. He watched carefully every penny, and he still does. He still does this, and I'm so grateful because as a young Christian, or even as a young person, I would have been one of those ones charging the card to the max so that I could have everything. And like I said, I would walk into their homes and they had, I couldn't believe it, but and I didn't envy them. Don't get me wrong. I did not envy them. I thought it was nice and wonderful that they had it. But they had throw rugs in their kitchen, which I did not have. They had space rugs here. They had bedspreads. They had everything. They had beautiful sheets and pillowcases. Everything I did not have, they had. They had nice clothing. They had everything, and they maxed out their charge cards. They had a nice car. They had, like I said, everything. And yet, us, we worked very hard saving. If we wanted to buy a refrigerator, we did not buy it unless we could pay cash for it. So that means I did without. If we had any extra money, which my husband worked doubles to pay off the house to make sure we had no house payment, he also worked doubles to keep my daughter in horses so that she could live out her dream. Because during those years I had a choice. I would either have nice things in the house or she would have her dream. And I'm so glad that I gave everything for her to live her dream, to have her own horse business. I have never regretted the choice. I didn't have pictures hanging on the walls. I still didn't have any rugs. I could remember uh, I only had 2 or 3 pots and pans. I had one set of daily silverware that was very cheap. I only had a couple of glasses I to drink out of. I didn't have anything. And it was a lot of years I didn't have anything because I went from one thing into another thing of other needs. So therefore, my choices, it wasn't that I couldn't get it, it was that I chose not to. So every choice was made that someone else could have. And I didn't mind it. In all honesty, I loved it. I was so happy that my daughter could have horses and train them the way she did. I was so happy that my neighbor could have everything. When just before we bought this house and found out we had enough money to buy a boat, we pulled the boat up in our backyard. And there were these women there, and they would sit and talk to my husband, but they wouldn't have really anything to do with me. Uh, and I wouldn't go out and sit with anybody because I'm not a gossip. I won't sit and gossip. And and they knew it. Anyway, so they come up, running up and saw the boat, and they said, "Oh, Bobby, we're going on a maiden voyage," to my husband. And I looked at them very seriously and I said, "There's only one woman that is going to go on a maiden voyage in this boat, and that is me." That's all I said. I said it quietly and I said it kindly. Well, as amazing as it is, people see things and they think you're nothing if you have nothing. And when we got that boat, neighbors who would never visit my door started coming. When we got to live on the water, they started coming. It was amazing how money clicked in their brain. I don't want or need friends like that. And like I said, if they came to my door and they gossiped and tried to gossip with me, I'd say, Not here. Not here, you don't. I don't want to talk about it. Don't come to my door and tell me about other people. Because the people you're talking about me also. I don't want to hear it. So you could say I was maybe not very well liked. Well, of course, because when you tell people the truth, some of them don't like it. I didn't go out there and say, you must hear the truth. I must tell. I didn't do that. But when you forced yourself on me, then I would tell you the truth. When you invaded my life with what you thought was right and good, I would back off and tell the truth. Because nobody invades me. Nobody tells me how to think, feel, live. I don't care who you are. God has a hold of my life. And in that relationship with Him, I would never dishonor Him for another person. In the beginning of the years that I did, I, without realizing what I was doing, I paid more attention to people than I did to God. And God didn't like it. And I got spanked. Ooh, did I get spanked? Because there He was. He gave me everything, and I was respecting others more than I respected what He said. And it took me a while before I really understood all this, that those that He loves, He chastises. Because He loved me. But during all these years, we're talking about something like 30 or 40 years that I did without. We're not talking about yesterday or just last week. We're talking about a lot of years of not asking God for anything, not asking Him for a new home, not asking Him for nothing. As bad as things got, I didn't ask Him. I just let Him know if this is what He wanted, because inside of me, I knew He could change everything. I knew that if He wanted to, He would, and He did. Many times He did. I had given the testimony about how we had bought 15 acres, paid $40,000 for 15 acres. Now, that was a long time ago. That was like almost 50 years ago. But in so doing, when the time come to sell the property, somebody come and wanted to buy it. I asked God how much it was worth, and He said $100,000. Now, if you look in the past videos, it was where an electric company wanted to buy one little piece of the property, and they wanted to give me $78,000 for it. So I went to God and I said, "What is the property worth?" And God says $100,000. So I told them, "Property is worth $100,000. If you want it, you're going to have to pay $100,000." Because see, I won't go back on what He tells me. And so it's that check I got for nothing. They wrote a check for $10,000 as a down payment. And all the neighbors, this was an electric company that wanted to bring a tower in on that property, and all the neighbors were holding out for more money. And I kept telling them, God tells me they gave me a fair price. And I was the only one that took a $10,000 down payment. And when I did that, and I said, what happens if it falls through? It doesn't happen. They said, well, you keep the money. Well, I did. I kept the money. What happened was when it fell through, someone came to the door. Now, I've got to tell you about this woman and what she did. Because she said, I have $40,000 in my hand, and I want you to sell me this house. It was a Sunday. I wasn't going to buy and sell anything. It was, we had just made a deal with the realtor, and I wasn't going to dishonor that. So I said, don't you want to look at the house? And she said, no, I won't. How many people do this? I'll never know. But she said that they were taking over her house for eminent domain, and she wanted the house. I said, well, there's problems wrong with the house. Uh, we're going to sell it as is. But as we walked through the house, we said, well, this is wrong with it. She said, I don't want to hear it. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. They won't give me my money if they find out anything's wrong with the house. I didn't lie to those people. She did. So then we went into another room and I said, this, and she said, no, no, please, please, don't tell me. Don't tell me. So we sold the house as it is. And then she went and says to everybody that we cheated her when we didn't. I went through it, telling her plainly, look, I wrote it down. This is exactly what's wrong with the house. You're buying a house for this. This is what people do. This is the way they are. So buying a house for $40,000, uh, she paid 90. I went to God and I said, God, you said it was worth 100. Why? Why did you not give me 100? And he said, well, the 10,000 and the 90 is $100,000. And I was amazed. To the penny, he did it right. So after we moved, we were traveling in a motorhome for a couple of years, and he bought a piece of a campground, and he paid $7,000 for it, I think. And that campground, it had 20 owners, and they cleared the property, and each owner on one side cleared the property as far back as they could, and he did a good job. It was beautiful. And then in the middle, they had some property. They eventually built a big pavilion and everything. And on the other side was all the renters. And the renters did not live close to each other. When they rented, they had big lots. And so when we sold that property, we probably made about $50,000 because we made it worth it. But when we moved from there and no longer wanted to travel up and down, I got a call from my brother-in-law who has 55 plus communities and and a double wide business. And he said, I have this property for $97,000. And will you come in Alabama and see it? And we did. And it was so trashed. I said, nope, I'm too old to clean up anymore. I won't work real hard on this. And so we went back home. He called us again and he said, I cleaned it up, put new carpeting in it, did a lot of things that I completely cleaned it up, and I will sell it to you for $67,000. Well, we wound up when we left there selling it for $119,000. My husband fixed a couple of things. We went into it had cathedral ceilings, and we went into because it was a double wide, we pulled off all of the strips, and then we put mesh over it, and then plastered it, and then wallpapered it, and it looked like a home. So of course we sold it for more money. All I'm trying to tell you is, if you're honest in your heart towards God, and you allow Him to tell you what things are worth, and I've always said this, and I'll say this even today. If you're selling cars, a car, the price you put on it is worth to the person that buys it the price they're willing to pay. It is not that you are cheating them. If God tells you it is worth 5,000 and they are willing to pay that, you haven't cheated them with anything, no matter what you think. So if you seek God for every price, God will tell you exactly. He will not play with your business. So I've taught this to people in business. So when it comes to horses, horses are worth what you're willing to pay for it. And my daughter had a horse that was, like she said, human hands never touched it. She trained it. And there was a little girl who she was training. She gave a lot of her time, a lot of her efforts to this family to ride this horse. And someone else wanted to buy it, and they come up with it, and they uh, one had a lot of money, and the people with the little girl didn't. And my daughter made the decision to sell $100,000 because she's in the business because all of that money went back into her horses. She had everything to keep them safe and secure and everything. She did everything. I mean, she had a chiropractor, she had acupuncture, she had veterinarians and shoe people, and she knew every bone and every muscle. And she was not about to take a horse that was worth that money simply because someone wanted it. She decided to sell it to this other man who had a daughter who went out and for that year won $100,000 on that horse because it was that good. That was her decision. That's how she came to it. She was a businesswoman. And a lot of people tried to take advantage of her and pull on her heartstrings to do what they wanted. And she had to keep herself to what was best for the business. And she did. But the horse was worth what you're willing to pay for it. So as they were bidding it up and going from 60,000 to 70,000, I mean, she was blown away because she never dreamed anybody would pay that price for that horse. But a horse, even a horse or a dog, is worth the price that you are willing to pay for it. And if you're willing, and if you're the seller and you're willing to give it at a cheaper price, then hey, it's up to you. What I'm talking about is being blessed. I'm talking about God coming into my life and doing these things with my life without me even asking Him. When I asked Him for a token of appreciation for my service to Him and my love for Him, because during that time I was ministering to everybody. Their lives were changing. People were being healed and delivered, and they were going to their churches and giving every penny to their churches. And nobody figured I was worthy of my hire. So every pastor was benefiting monetarily from my hard work, which I didn't mind. I didn't deprive him of it. I didn't get angry. I didn't get upset. I didn't mind. But I knew I was worthy of my hire. I knew before God. And so one thing I did go before God and tell Him this: I gave you every part of my life, and I did not give every penny to these people or these people because of them. I did it because I believed that's what you wanted me to do. I did not do one thing without believing that I was a blessing to you. So if you think I gave every penny here because I loved those people, I may have loved them, but you came first, Lord. And these people over here, this is what I did because you came first, Lord. I wanted to please you. So therefore, I thought that was the way to please you. So I gave every penny. Well, he came to me and told me, Marion, I asked you for 10%. I didn't ask you for everything. And you have lived a lot of years without. You gave your rental property out to people. They didn't appreciate it, and they just spit on you with it, and they trashed it. So you gave out things over here, and they didn't appreciate it. They just spit on you, and they trashed it. And God says, if you take a dog and you give a dog away, nobody will take care of it. But if you make them pay $10 for it, $50 for it, they will make sure they take care of it because they remember that money. Which is amazing to me, but this is what God taught me in all of these experiences. This is how He taught me. This is how He taught me how to value myself. Because He said, like my daughter was such an expert in training children, horses, everything. And she was charging $15 for a lesson. And I sat her down and I said, look, if you don't value your work, no one else will. Put a price on it. Put a bigger price on it. Well, as she grew in reputation and everything else, she got paid a lot of money for it. But she started out for $15, and she ended up, when I talked to her, for $50, and it grew from there. I mean, a lot of people can give a lot of lessons on how to ride, but not the expertise she can do. Anyway, I live by these principles that you're worthy of your hire because God says you are. But you can't make people give to you. You can't make people touch their hearts. You're sinning. You're coveting their money. You can't do that. I would never do that. So what I did is God taught me. He said, I have people in reserve that make a lot of money, and they get blessed by the giving. He says, so don't pray for that particular person. Just ask me if I have somebody in reserve, just ask me and I'll send it. Well, he did. But there are people who are so jealous. And like I said, I don't mean the person with his comment because I know he didn't mean it that way. So jealous, so filled with hatred, so angry that you have and they don't have. Well, I didn't get here by being that way. I got here by loving on other people and grateful. If I saw an elderly person that had everything they need, oh, wow, that was wonderful. I got here because it was Christ-like. I let Christ in me reign, not my flesh. My flesh would have said, I don't have and they have. How come? How come? I did when I was very young cry, why me? Why do I have to pay the price of always doing what is right and everybody taking advantage of me? I did that 50 years ago. I have never done that since. Because I discovered that that's not the way you please God. What I searched for was God's moral excellence, His virtue. I saw that, and I wrote it in a book, I saw that the woman who needed a touch and touched the hem of His garment, she was looking for more than a healing. He was thronged. See, and I'm hoping this helps some of you. He was thronged. And He said, who touched me? And the disciple says, what are you talking about? Didn't say it in those words, but we're thronged. How would you know some? But that one little woman touched Him. So I put out some messages. Can you or do you touch God? Everybody knows that Jesus touches you, but are you able to touch God? And I explain how you touch God. You touch Him by seeking His virtue, seeking His moral excellence. That's how you touch Him. Oh, that's how you please God the Father. Because you see, I said there's only one way to please Him, and that is by loving His Son, believing His Son. Oh, not by praising Him all day, and when you make choices, they're devilish. Not by reading your Bible all day, and when you make choices, you're devilish. Not by going to church 3 times a week. And when you make choices, they're devilish. They're not of God. They're mean, they're cruel, there are so many things wrong, and yet you still lift your hands and praise the Lord. And then you wind up wondering, why doesn't He hear my prayers? Why? A lot of people who were resentful and hateful towards another race, thinking that their ancestry caused them to deserve everything. A lot of people decided to covet what was not theirs and take it and tell you, I'm taking this. It belongs to me. Your ancestors did this, this, and this. Well, what about you? Why didn't you work? You know, I was raised in the slums. I came from nothing. I worked hard for every single thing I ever had. And yet, your excuse is you can't make it because you don't have it. Well, my my ancestry would have been, many people would spit on it, uh, and hurt me because and they did. Oh, did they? When I got into the Christian world, you talk about persecution. I was able and good enough to clean their latrines, scrub their floors, take care of their children, do every filthy, dirty job there was. But I was not good enough to sit at their table. I was not good enough to sit at the table. I could prepare everything, do everything. I had every menial, rotten job there was. When I cleaned the commodes, you go behind those commodes. No woman would go behind those commodes and get on her hands and knees and clean behind it in the church. You could see right where they just went to it and all the filth behind it. But I went back there and cleaned it because it was God's house. I went and cleaned everything till it sparkled because it was God's house. I didn't do it for anybody to say, oh, I didn't do it for those reasons. I didn't care who saw it or who didn't see it. I worked in every rotten job there was to do that men wouldn't do when they were men's jobs. I worked for almost 20 years like that just to go into a church for them to spit on me and say, well, you're not working in here. And because you won't work in here, you don't have God. I'm sorry, but I have to laugh because these people are so foolish and so ignorant of who God really is. If they had the Spirit of God, they would have seen me coming and honored the work that I did somewhere else. But they don't do that. They don't see you with their eyes because their judgment is according to their eyes. If they don't see you, they'll talk about you. They'll lie about you. They'll call you a cheat. They'll tell you. But it doesn't matter that you worked and labored in a church till you got so sick you wound up flat on your back because you did every menial job there was and you were mistreated horribly. You gave every penny, you did everything. And that is the place where the one young lady that all the money I had, which wasn't very much, went to her child for school. And in that school, she would look at me and she'd say, take 50 cents and throw it and say, here, go buy yourself a soda. You're so stupid you do not know how to get 50 cents to buy a soda. Well, needless to say, I didn't pick it up. But I'm telling you, the abuse in church was unbelievable. But I thank God. I do. I thank God for what I went through. I thank God for the suffering and the pain because I learned where God is and where He isn't. I learned that because a person says they're a pastor, they are not. I learned that because a person says, well, I've been in this church for 20 years doing this, and you're not going to come along and tell me how to do it. I mean, not that I tried to do that. I heard them saying that to other people. I learned who was for real and who wasn't. I learned. I learned what not to be. God told me when I went into these places, He said, I want you to learn where I am not, which is a true definition of a cult. And I learned where God was not. Very painful lessons. Very painful. Painful here and painful here. But I died. Marion Lynch died. And Jesus rose up and lived. And He's still living today. He's still doing for others today. So when you come and judge, have at it. Because if you think that you can pick me apart, understand one thing. You may wind up going where I went. You may wind up in a condition I was in. You may suffer the things that I suffered because God's watching over me. He's not going to let you tear down what He built up. And that's true. I don't care what you claim your doctrine is. I don't care how many millions of followers you have. I am telling you in the name of Jesus Christ, He's not going to let you pull me down.